Jen?
I missed the beginning of the
Okay, we'll call to order the October 5th, 2022 Aspen Pitkin County Housing Authority regular board meeting. Cindy, roll call, please.
Okay, Francie,
Here.
Skippy,
Present.
Carson,
Here.
and Allison.
Yes, here.
Thank you.
Kelly will not be attending tonight. She is warming up for tomorrow night, scrum night.
Oh, that's what she has tomorrow night.
Tomorrow night's scrub night. I didn't
For
realize
her
that.
and Joey.
I want to see that.
Me too.
Rachel
Here he
will not
is.
be here
John Ward as well.
And John,
either.
here.
Present.
Allison, if you tell us what type of cookies you would have preferred to eat had you been here, I'm happy to have one for you.
I got my bubbles in solidarity, my seltzer. I wish I was there snacking.
Is that to keep us from like advertising issues? When you hold it up, it looks blurry.
I need to get it really close to my face, so yeah, it's not blurred out.
All right, well, we will move to public comment. Do we have any public comment online? Doesn't look like it. Okay, then we will move to board of director comments, and we'll start with Allison.
None right now, thank you.
Okay, Francie?
I just wondering how people feel about Proposition 123 and whether APCHA itself is going to make a statement about it,
The affordable
support
housing
it,
piece.
the affordable housing one. But we can get back to that later. I don't really have a statement to make.
Got it.
Can't say I'm familiar with that one, or I've
Yeah.
read up on it. Skippy?
I have no comments. I have not investigated that personally, although Tara on our staff has, Sarah has, and a few others whose opinions I trust, and I'm happy to share that with you
Okay.
on or off record.
Okay.
John?
No comment. We'll talk about
Okay.
what I'll talk about.
Well, I just had one, and it's more of a question. So is John on, did John, is he on
Oh,
the
that
board?
reminds me, yeah. That was my comment. I was trying to figure that out, how that
I
worked
think
out.
we're going to finalize it the next regular meeting.
Okay.
It did come up that we had screwed up and we didn't finally
I was
do it.
waiting, I haven't
Did
seen anything in
nobody
city
even
council
say
either.
to you
We did our
that yes?
Did they?
Yeah, we did our appointments.
I was looking at your guys'
We
minutes
may
that I
have
could
held
find.
back that one until they did. I don't recall.
We definitely approved it, but we didn't sign anything. We
You didn't do
the
anything
right thing.
official,
Okay.
so
Yeah.
it's.
So it's next Wednesday.
Unofficially, you're it.
So I can't-
Officially,
I
they
gotta
still
be
have to do
careful not
something.
screw up too soon.
Yeah, don't make any mistakes in the next week. Unless, of course,
Hold that
you
for
want to
next
be
meeting.
home on every other Wednesday night, then you could screw up.
And then there's, right, there's an alternate position open, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay,
There is?
there is.
Yeah.
David-
My understanding is they're
David's-
trying to, they did have another person sign up for, or apply for it, that they're trying to set up a meeting between both, whether they can still try to do it together or separate. They're trying to figure that out. Charlotte and I think Nicole or somebody in the city clerk's office is trying to figure that out.
Yeah, I think I remember hearing that, actually.
Yeah.
But we did discuss the fact that we'd screwed up and didn't do the right paperwork for you, so we are doing it.
I would appreciate it.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Thank you. Okay, executive director comments.
Good evening, everyone. Just a few things today. We had a really nice write-up of the core program, which we did with them. It's on their website, and we will link to our website. They actually hired a freelance journalist to write it up, so there's quite a long article on it, and which is also great advertising for APCHA, so we'll put that up. We're trying to figure out a way to show all the work we do on compliance. We pulled up some numbers, and we were ready to.
You
Sorry.
said you were going to wait 2 weeks for that type of behavior.
Well, I was trying to mute my watch and I pushed the wrong button. I apologize.
But we
Just joking.
we made the mistake of running that by Tom, who wants to just he wants to review it and maybe have an executive session just to run over it. It's anonymous data just to show the number of cases we're taking care of and what they are. So stay tuned for that. But we're working on that just to try and add a bit more transparency to the work we're doing.
Why is that a legal thing?
I'm not sure. I think Tom just.
I see,
think when we
okay.
told Tom, he said, "Just let me have a look first.
Okay.
And then he's reserving the right to have an executive session.
Great.
And then I met with Pitkin County Social Services and Mountain Family Organization this week. And they were asking me about the homeless situation in the valley. And I didn't realize this, but most of the unhomed people in the valley are actually working. And so we are sitting down in 2 weeks, and I'm bringing Sandra over, who's our LIHTC expert, and we're going to just try and see if maybe there's a solution there to try and get some of those LIHTC units we
Yeah.
have filled.
God, that'd be great.
You know, it's the old problem of getting one federal program to interact with another federal program, and you end up having to fill in the gaps. But we're going to sit down and see if there's something there we can work with. So we are still working very hard on trying to find a way to fill those LIHTC units.
That's great.
Yeah. And I'll leave it there. Cindy?
That would be great.
Yeah.
Win.
I think we might have a sales unit available. We're still working on it, so all I can suggest is to make sure you sign up for notifications just in case we do. Thank you.
And Rachel always asks that we like list the ones that are for sale. Do we know what those are? I know there's a new one because I bid on one.
That was from last time, though. I
Okay.
mean, though, we have an Alpine Cottage, and which
We
is a
have-
4-bedroom, which is just going.
Yeah, we have
Crazy.
an Alpine Cottage one, which is a 4-bedroom. We have a 3-bedroom that's located at ABC, and then a 2-bedroom that's on Independence, I think.
It can't be Common Ground.
I don't know where, but I know
Okay.
it's a 2-bedroom.
Okay.
Yeah, and the new packet deadline for the Alpine Cottage and the 3-bedroom at the ABC was due today at 4.
So those closed. If you had a new packet, if you're all updated and everything, you can still apply for those until Wednesday, 4:00 next week.
Sprinkle.
And if I could just have my time back for a sec.
I didn't know you wanted to.
Bethany just
Oh my
zapped
God,
a
I might
message,
go for
and
34
Tom
or
wants
something.
everybody just to be aware of the Cora implications of that, which is why he's going to have of posting compliance and not even anonymized data, and he just wants everybody aware, and he'll probably do an executive session on that. That's what he wants to talk about.
Okay,
Thanks.
sounds good. Okay, moving on. We have the consent calendar with the minutes of September 21st, regular meeting.
I'll move to approve.
Motion from John.
I will move to approve.
Oh, that's fun. How come no one ever says that?
Do you need a second?
I need a second.
I got one.
I had an issue with the minutes.
Okay,
Francie, in my defense, I believe that when you were nominated as treasurer without being part of the meeting, I said no, not yes, though I'm very proud for you to serve in that role.
I'm not sure what you're talking about.
okay, it's on page 5.
Kelly didn't tell you?
Allison voted no.
This is why.
Okay.
Why?
Page
I
5
guess we
of
don't have to
what?
find
Okay.
out. Why did you vote?
Page 5 of the packet. Okay, I got you, Allison. Okay, so.
That's how my memory, and it's not, to me, that one doesn't
Yep.
make that much difference, but I do want to make sure our votes are always accurate.
I will fix that. I will.
Other
Oh, this
changes,
packet.
Allison?
What did you vote for?
Nobody.
This is about.
John, would you like to amend your motion with the change from Allison?
Yes. Motion to approve the minutes as amended.
All right.
Does she have to accept that as friendly?
All
I'll
right.
second that.
We have a motion on the table.
All right, now I'm there.
Okay.
Okay.
John,
Yes.
Allison,
Yes.
Carson,
Yes.
Skippy,
Yes.
and Francie.
Yes.
Okay. Next item on the agenda is the public hearing of resolution number 5, series 2022, adopting minor amendments to the APCHA regulations. So this is Cindy and Bethany. How do we want to do this? Do we want to go through these again? Francie, you weren't here last time.
No, I was not.
Did,
I'm happy, Carson, to go through them again if you'd like.
yeah, let's just maybe just highlight the changes here.
Sure. So in the fraud warning section of the APCHA regulations, through our counsel, Tom Smith, we are adding the provision on sham marriage. That was our recommendation. And that would be added in under fraud warning. Gives APCHA a little bit more protection with sham marriages. Unfortunately, we tend to see these because it can bypass the lottery system by getting married to add someone to your deed and then moving out. So this will give us a little bit more protection, and Tom has recommended the addition of this.
Okay.
Can I ask you a question about that, or do you want to go through them all first?
Let's let Bethany run through them, and then we can do
The
questions.
next one, section for qualification rules, APCHA will review a qualification application once a year, and only a second time or a third time during that year if there's a household change, which would be like a new baby or a new member to the household, which would then affect category based upon income and assets. We can certainly, people present them other times too, and so if it's something off, we can look at it. But the next one, Rachel had requested we add in the word adult for adult child. So this is in conveyances outside the bid process. The current owner, and then what we're asking to add in is the current owner must provide the most recent year of federal, state income tax returns, employment verification, and recent pay stub. Obviously, if they're retired, they're not going to have a pay stub, but we really do want to make sure that that unit is in compliance before we allow the addition to the title. And then the final change is an addition in the definition section. This was unintentionally omitted in, I believe, 2018. And so this is bringing that definition back in and defining a family in APCHA's view. And this definition is really pulled from the IRS. So it's in, as most of our provisions are regarding that, it's in alliance with that.
Okay.
Happy to answer any questions. That was really quick.
Skippy, go ahead.
Yeah, question about the sham marriage one. It's maybe a weird question, but I know a number of people in the Valley who, over the years, have gotten married. Although they were partners, may have jumped early for immigration purposes. In some cases, people being here, working in the community for 15 years, but were going to have to leave the country unless they got married. And others, war or other things back home. I mean, some situations where, I viewed their partnership as an honorable thing. And so I just wonder about the intersection of those type of relationships with this policy.
So I think this policy really goes for the marriage in which you are getting married only to add a name to the title of your property, and then for you to no longer to remove your own name after 1 or 2 years, so that the unit goes to someone else outside the lottery process. Unfortunately, I can say we've definitely seen some situations like this, and this just gives us a little bit more leverage if we do think a transfer is happening that isn't correct or fair, and is just a way to circumvent the rules and the regulations and the deed restriction that your unit must go to lottery by just giving it to someone that you would like to. So it's more targeted. It's certainly not targeted what you're talking about.
Yeah, and I think the only time like that scenario would come up is if somebody was in that situation and they added somebody, right? They bought a property together and then they
engaged in this behavior.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Well, this is also flashing red light in the warning section, right?
Right.
Yeah.
That's why it's there.
Understood.
Yeah.
Understood.
Any other questions or comments on any of these regulation changes? or a recommendation to approve? Motion
You have to
approve.
open it up, even though there's nobody here, you
Okay.
have to open it up to public.
All right, so we will open it up for
Comment.
public comment. Is there any public comment online? Not
Carson,
seeing
I had my
anyone.
hand up too.
Oh, sorry, Allison, I can't get into the Zoom meeting,
And we can't see on the
Oh.
and I
screen.
can't see you on the screen, so.
So my system of just yelling out is,
You,
is
you
the
might
right
just have
way.
to, you might just have to yell out.
Okay, perfect. Just two comments. One, with the sham marriages, I understand that provision. I think in the future, little by little, when we have extra time to clean things up, it'd be nice to like see what else we can do to get support so that it's not up to APCHA staff to determine that, which sounds like an added burden, but that we allow, you know, a change in a living situation. You're allowed to move into the house kind of thing, but you don't go on the title, or you go on the title only if you're also on the mortgage. Just some other way that other institutions are helping us verify that. And then I had a question about the transferability right now, eligibility requirements. Does the person who a house would be transferred to have to meet our 1,500 hours requirement?
Yeah.
Like, an 18-year-old is an adult child, maybe in high school, not working 1,500, but their parents pass away. Is one thought, or
Well, that transfer happens automatically. Nobody's
Yeah.
physically doing that.
And there's
It's a
situations
transfer.
like that come up. In fact, there was just one, and we work with that, Allison, we will not.
okay,
So that's something that, it's something that, because, especially if that person decides to go to school, they can maintain ownership of it and rent it out to qualified employee for a specific period of time until that person has finished college. And then when they come back, they can live in that unit, or they can also put it up for sale as well.
okay. And then, like a transfer to a sibling, that's like if you had, I guess I don't understand that transfer as much, maybe if you were already living together, but are you allowed to have a sibling who's in the valley, you're about to leave the valley, and you're allowed to just give it to them and not let them, and I guess I don't know the justification behind someone who's not already living with you getting to kind of jump ahead because they had a lucky brother or sister earlier in the process.
Yeah, so the regs as they've been written do allow for that transfer to a sibling even if they're not in the unit. We can certainly look at these provisions again. I think the board must have looked at them right before you got on because
Okay.
there were some changes to those provisions because we did tighten up the requirements to meet minimum occupancy -1 was what was decided, and category has to be, I believe, 5 or lower.
Okay.
For certain transfers. So we did try to recently tighten those up a bit just to reduce them, but that doesn't mean we can't look at them again in the future.
And and Allison, if you're transferring to a sibling and you're leaving, that
Yeah.
sibling has to meet the minimum occupancy requirement, the category, and have at least a 4-year work history in Pitkin County. If you're transferring to a sibling,
Okay,
okay?
And that's page 38 of the regulations, or your packet, just so if you do want to quickly look at it.
thank you. And then I thought, did Rachel ask last time too to add grandparent as one of the transferability? I don't know if that's ever come up. But especially I think if that family member's already living with you, they
I
wouldn't.
think she asked for grandchildren and to think about it.
Okay.
So I think at the time that we bring back the kind of overarching rules on conveyances outside the bid process and really look at it, we can look at grandchildren at that time, as well as re-examine the rationale for siblings. So I think we can certainly do that if the board would like to down the road.
Perfect, and I think that's all I'm saying here is putting that little bee in the board's ear, as they say.
What do they say?
It's gonna be in the board's ear.
Never heard that in my life.
Okay. Any other questions on that? If not, we'll open it up for public comment. No one in the room. Anyone online with public comment on resolution number 5? Not seeing any. So would entertain a motion to approve.
I recommend approving resolution number 5, series 2022, requesting amendments to specific sections of the Aspen Pitkin County Housing Authority regulations as stated above.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion from John, a second from Francie.
Okay. Francie? Skippy?
Yes.
Carson?
Yes.
John?
Yep.
Allison?
I just have to say congratulations, because we've been working on these things for a year. And now it's gonna be published and we're done for a while.
I think you were just refining. These are
Yeah.
low-hanging fruit.
Yeah, it just
Yeah.
kind of always keeps going. That's how it is.
Well, let's
How
get
is
it out
that?
there and just sit with it for a little while.
Okay.
All right, so motion passes. We will move on. Further discussion on AMI.
Great. Okay, so Maddie, if you can jump down to page 77 of the board packet, that would be great. So I think it was 2 meetings ago, there was a request from the board to bring back some different data on AMI and kind of what we're seeing. We had suggested to move categories by 5 to 10% on AMI, and you all had asked for more data. So I'm here to present that. Quick reminder that the AMI is the midpoint of a region's income distribution. Half of the households earn more and half earn less, and it's calculated based upon gross income. We get those numbers about every May, and we have not seen an increase since 2019, if I'm correct. We've been holding with 2019 numbers because those AMIs have actually gone down for the Pitkin County area the past 2 years. So what the request was from the board was to look at recent lottery winners, where they were in their category for income and assets compared to the category of the unit that they purchased. So Maddie, if you scroll down to the next page, what we have here is a random chart. We've removed any identifiable information. And what you're looking at is the unit category is on the far left. The next column is the category from the application. So what the household actually was. We then have the sale price of the house, the household income, household assets, household size, and then the last two columns are the income limit and asset limit for that unit. So if we look at the first row, the unit category, so the unit that went for lottery was a category 1. The folks that bid on it obviously were category 1 because you can't bid down. The sales price of the house was $159,890. Their household income was $41,961, and then their assets were $12,000. Represents a household of 2. So for a category 1 unit with a household size of 2, the max income for that unit would be $44,000. So they were, roughly $2,300 below the income limit, and their assets were quite a bit below what the asset limit would be, which was $147,000 for a category 1 unit. So we pulled this. I believe the request for this data was to really look at whether we really even needed to adjust categories or not, or keep the AMI categories as they are. So I'm happy to answer any questions quickly. You will, and see if I can explain anything, but is that clear so far?
You mean, is the chart clear?
Yeah.
Yes.
How did category 5, bottom page, income limit was 185, and their family income was 188?
So what some of this is, and I should have clarified that piece. Great catch, John. If the house closed before we required updated W-2s or taxes, we are seeing what their new income is, which could be above what they purchased, what their category was they purchased. And occasionally that does happen. They might have purchased last year but have a new packet in because they're looking at something else. So we sometimes see that goes up. Because this is a snapshot of home truck right now. It's not necessarily a snapshot of what happened at time of sale or time of purchase, excuse me.
I mean, I guess there's a couple of them in here that you know what I'm seeing.
We might not have had their 2021 information at that point in time. They might, some of these could have closed at the beginning, before April 15th. So we didn't ask for 2021 information. So they were still at that category until we got that.
I mean, a lot of them, I mean, the ones that are within category, you're not, you know, I would expect you probably bump up closer on category 1 to the limit than others. But a lot of them, you know, the next 3 are within that range, right?
Yeah, and we actually found this a very interesting exercise too, John. Really looking at kind of the data as to what we've seen happen, and certainly don't necessarily want to make a recommendation, but I think we're comfortable leaving categories as they are from a sale and purchase perspective, and maybe switching the conversation down the road to affordability standards and looking at it from that lens, and not necessarily just adjusting categories.
I mean, the scary part when you look at, and maybe there's a story here too, but it's more household income and I mean, there's a bigger spread on when you let people buy up in category, right? Like,
Yeah.
you got 156,000 in household income, category 3 limits 158. They bought a $318,000 purchase. That's when you kind of wonder, they've got assets, but you wonder, can they maintain that unit appropriately?
Well, they're $7,000 below the minimum in that one, or the maximum.
But they do have double the price in assets.
Right.
Yeah, I know they have assets, household assets, but you're looking at their household income.
Yeah, yeah.
That's
Right. Like, I think you look at the 326, which is,
$4,500 a month.
you know, 87,000, and then a negative 526 in assets.
Which are looking at?
Oh yeah, that other one too is kind of scary too. Like,
That, to me, that's the
scarier
That's
one,
the scary one.
right?
Which one?
this one right here.
Yeah, the one when you're,
Are those assets like what they have left after the down payment, or are those pre-down?
no, that's the net assets that they provide to us. Their assets minus their liabilities. And so you see the one that's the top one of the category 4, which category 3 can bid on. And you see that they have a negative $152,000 in liability.
oh yeah,
How do you, gentlemen who work at banks, how do you do that?
you got credit card debt, man.
Oh, that's just that's outside of I see, it's net.
Automobiles.
Got it.
Student loans, cars.
So that doesn't mean that they have a total of negative.
The hot tub they bought.
Got it.
Yeah, that's a zero value.
That thing has been coming back to bite me year after year. You know how much chlorine costs?
Carson, can you see me?
I can, go ahead.
Okay. Well, I think to stay on that for a moment, I mean, a bank gave them a loan, right? Even with negative assets at 152? So, like, that's,
Well,
if-
the story could have been student loans,
Right.
whatever else, right? I'm just saying, income versus mortgage, at some point, that's the affordability standard we're
Yeah.
talking about, so that people can actually maintain their properties and have kind of a, you know, an idea that they're
Well,
gonna
but
turn a
Isn't that
property
also
over.
what banks need, because they don't want people going into default? I mean, there's other people, I think, looking out for things like that as well. I do love this chart, and I want to take 7 different colored highlighters to it to figure this all out, but I agree that until you get to the top of category 5, our categories look pretty good. It does seem like a couple people, either one right in the nick of time, and now that we see their data one later, you know, this 228 and 188 both making significantly more than the income limit now. And that's what I'm hearing too, you know, that it's that top of the end where people are getting salaried out of the system. So I don't know how much sympathy there is there or if that is the way to go. But I think that's where we're seeing the biggest mismatch. And then the other thing that is just really staggering to me is that Cat 1 unit sold for $159. You're allowed to make 44 total, I think, for a household of 2, or maybe that was 1 kid. But you also had a house for someone who's allowed to make 114 sell for 192. I mean, like 123. Sorry, like these Category 3 purchasers are buying at Cat 1 prices essentially. And I would love if we have a stock that is that cheap, that we're able to provide it for our lower income, people who could afford it better. So my highlighter row would be like, who is cost burdened the most, or like which of these sales prices and incomes are getting cost burdened. But I think our biggest out of whack, more than the category, is our sales price.
You also have to take into consideration what property that could be, because more than likely it's a property that's 30, 40 years old. So their HOA dues are high. So right now you're not looking at what somebody's HOA dues are, because we do have some Centennial units and Hunter Creek units that are lower price, but their HOA dues are astronomical. So this doesn't show you the whole picture of what their monthly costs are going to be.
With that,
Okay.
Cindy, with that, so point taken. But Allison, so we don't just reject your suggestion out of hand. Is what you're saying, am I understanding you correct, in that if a unit comes in that has a higher category number, but the actual price of sale is very low, assuming we look at those other things, so we're looking at the sort of the total payment, but that if that total payment remained a low number, that it should be available to a lower category bidder? Is that your suggestion?
I don't know if I'm all the way proposing that
Okay.
big of a change to our process, but I do think if you're allowed to make, $100,000 a year, and there's homes available to you that are 123, 136, Category 1, we're telling them you're not even allowed to bid on those.
Right.
It's cheaper than the thing we're making you bid on, but you're not even allowed to bid 2 up.
Right.
So I do hear that we need to focus on the full cost, at least of the livability of HOA, capital reserve, and mortgage. But it does seem like a weird rule that we're letting people who make significantly more than you be part of a lottery that you're not allowed to be part of for a cheaper house.
Yeah, and I don't think we're gonna chop this up and just invent a new policy now, but just as far as things to kind of think about later, there's sort of there's one fix to that allows lower category people to have more access to things that are affordable. There's another fix that says we raise that price and we use that price increase to fund whether it's capital reserves or improvements or other things that we've said we're interested in.
Well,
That's a really interesting idea, Skippy. Sorry, go ahead. Someone else was trying to talk.
Oh, I was just going to say, you've got the thing I noticed too is you've got a huge range on Category 4. And I think along with your idea, right, you've got 187,000 to 530,000, all with the same income. And that Category 4 is cheaper than all of the Category 3s.
Yeah.
That 187.
And I would hate to say, sometimes things stay cheaper because only one person lived in it, and I don't think it's true that just because someone lived in something for a long time, they let it go. I think a lot of people do maintain their houses well, but I would hate to say that the things that are cheapest should always go to our lower earners in the community, so that, the only houses that are available are the most torn down. I don't want to create a class system in that way. So I like your idea more, Skippy, of pricing things at livability standards in the category that they're in, what we know those earners could be making and could afford, and using differences to help support the system more, rather than making our cheapest and theoretically most rundown properties always just go to our poorest members of our community.
So for now.
And I think these are all good, and I know something we talked about as staff today was kind of doing a frequency chart of where our where our current properties are, and then within their categories, kind of looking at pricing and sales price. So certainly something that you all will see down the road. We don't have that for you, obviously, right now, but certainly something we're going to look at. So
I have a question. I'm just, more than the negative 526, I'm sort of interested in the really high assets in that column. I don't know if you talked about this when I left to go to the bathroom quickly. Did you have that discussion? About like 623,000 in assets?
Right, with 56,000 in income.
Yeah.
Right.
Or the 570, 607,000 in assets, like, how do you have $607,000 in assets if you don't own a home?
Somebody
Well,
saved
couple
very
options.
well.
A couple options.
I mean,
It could be some of their retirement
retirement
funds as well.
accounts.
Oh, it's retirement accounts?
Yeah, because we
Could
count
be.
60% of their retirement funds.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay,
So that's everything. That's 60% retirement, and then all of your
diamonds and everything.
everything.
And the assets, if the assets are higher, if your income is lower, but the assets are, say your income is category 3, but your assets are category 5, you're a category 5 in our system.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
I mean, I don't know, I mean, without making it extremely difficult for staff, I don't know how you correct for the $187,000 category 4. Because, I mean, to me, I think Allison makes a good point that, like, that $187,000 category 4, certainly category 3 could afford that, and, well, they could bid on it, but category 2, you know, there's one of the 3 category 2s is more expensive than the category 4. You know, I mean, like in that instance, I think it would make sense to allow people in category 2 to bid on $187,000 property. But I think Bethany, and I think this is what you were saying with the affordability standard, I think until we have some idea of where that number should be, I mean, you really can't make any progress on this.
Are these sales in the last year or something? I forget what the name of this chart is.
These are
your
recent,
yeah.
Okay.
recent lottery winners' income and assets compared to category limits.
And purchases are complete. These are done deals.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's and maybe that's where you start allowing I mean, part of the reason why we limited category buy-ups is sheer inventory, right? People that are category 1 or 2 could bid up 2, 3 categories and buy them if they could qualify for the mortgage, whereas somebody that's category 4 isn't bidding down. Or somebody that's so all of a sudden
You're
there
competing
was a
with everybody else.
fairness
in the-
spectrum,
yeah,
right?
That
That's
was,
why we
that
did
was
it.
another reason why we did it that way.
What do you mean fairness in this case?
Well, so I'm just saying that category 2s could bid all the way through the system and income level, whereas somebody that had income level or an asset level that was category 5 could only bid on category 5 or RO, right? So whether the purchase price or not, I get that discussion, but it was also just, you know, as a category 2 buyer or income level, there was a bigger world of opportunity for you, whereas that was much smaller for other people. I think that was one of the reasons why we made that change.
That was one of the reasons, another reason too. We got a lot of people who were category 4 saying that it just was frustrating for them because they had to compete with category 1 and 2 people. And they couldn't go for category 1 or 2 or category 3 units. So now they have a little bit more of a chance because there's not as many people in that bucket.
Yeah, but, I mean, I understand that. I think just for me, just going back, I mean, you look at the category 3s. There's 2 category 3s that are lower than the category 1.
Yeah, but I mean, part of that is you don't know the story behind that category 3.
Right. I mean, I understand.
You don't know whether
but
it was
I mean,
a unit that had been a category 3 for 30 years and never changed hands, never had any capital improvements, and it was just appreciating based upon,
right.
Or it had
Could
high
be.
assessments or whatever else.
But to me, the 187 category 4, I mean, that looks like a pretty good deal if you can make up to $181,000 and
Making 164.
And they actually do make
Yeah,
164.
no, I'd
Yeah.
love to have the.
Yeah, I'll pay that off real quick.
That size, wouldn't you?
So
I'd love to make 164.
if we had an affordability standard, which, I mean, to me, that's one of the easiest things because I think there is kind of like a nationally agreed upon, right? Like it should be a third of your take home or whatever. But if we have an affordability standard, what we could do is still put people in categories based on income and assets. But then you bid on the things that are in your affordability, right? So this is affordability blue, this is affordability red, this is affordability green, and you are allowed per year for your packet to bid on the ones that fit your affordability and the other provisions, of course, occupancy. Like that's how that would work instead.
That's how it could work. Yeah,
Well,
I mean, I think we'd have to create the plan around it, certainly.
Yeah.
But
And
yes.
I think that's the
And-
way that Snowmass does it.
Interesting. Okay, so that's interesting. Yeah,
Yeah.
this chart really helps, I think, explain that that's something worth looking into. Not how we classify, but where you bid. One point just on the fairness, that along with category, I think that happens with household size too, except for studios. Single people don't get a priority on anything, so they're bidding against all 2-person households for, single 1-bedroom apartments, or sometimes 3-person households, whereas those people can bid for, on 2s and 3s as well, and singles can't. So that part, the occupancy fairness of who can bid where and up and down, reminds me of why we changed our category bid
Sounds like an opportunity for a sham marriage.
parameters.
Yeah, I mean,
Usually.
I think though the problem that we have is that you have a huge range within categories, and my understanding is to try and change a category from a 4 to a 3. It's land use approvals. It's not just as simple as, oh, we're going to change it.
We don't have the ability.
We don't
to do
have the
that.
ability to do that.
Do you mean a large range of the price of the house?
The price of the house. I mean, the category 4 from 1. So category from
187,
120,
yeah, to 4.
123 to 402. I didn't even catch the 123, right? That was won by somebody in category 3.
I don't see 123.
So we're not allowed to change the category name of
That's
that deed
category-
restriction, but we're allowed to
Three.
change what
That's
that
category
category
4. A category
is.
3 owner wanted.
No, we're not
Right.
allowed to change the category. The category was based on how the development came forward in most cases.
But we're allowed to change what it means to be in that category.
Yes, you're right.
Oh, I didn't even
You're
notice
right,
that far
Allison, you're
left.
right.
Thank you.
Yep.
Well,
Thank you so much.
Cindy, help me, correct me if I'm wrong, right? But there's a mix of those things. There's certainly been instances where, at least at the council table, we've considered changing categories on things, and not just things that were not yet developed. So there are instances in which we can do that. I mean,
But it's going in front of the entity that approved that, and
Yeah.
it's usually the city council or the board of county commissioners.
right.
So it's not that it's not because we didn't make that determination. We have to go to
At
one
this
or the
table.
other. Yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
but they can be changed, and those rules presumably could also be changed. And I have no idea if anyone would want to entertain changing them, or
Yeah.
if there would be downsides that I have not. I've just thought of. We're just starting this now, right? But it's not to say that down the line, if we're looking to solve a bigger equation, those are immutable laws.
I mean, it feels like if there's one-offs that are way out of the norm,
Yeah.
that would be these guys saying, hey, HOA dues are this is what the price is, this should be a category 2, right? Or whatever, and then making that, although it's just gonna slow down the sales process, because you guys are slow.
We are very slow. We
It
should work on
takes
that
forever, and, but to get that
Right.
category lowered.
And I think right, once you go down that road, I mean, you'd have to look at, like you said, if it's a category 4 unit that somebody's lived in for 30 years, that's gonna have roofs and siding and
Well,
windows.
and that's the
right?
other
Then
part of
that's
that
where
too.
you maybe don't
How
make
well
the
is that
adjustment.
HOA
Right.
funded? What are the capital assessments of the entire HOA gonna be? Do they have future plans? All of a sudden, that HOA assessment
Right.
is minuscule to what it's gonna be at some point.
Right, yeah.
Right.
Or does the city, county, or APCHA purchase the unit at that lower price and make sure that it's brought up to standards? And then if it's still low enough and you can still sell it
Yeah.
at the maximum price and there's amount there, that it goes into a capital reserve fund.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is an interesting thought.
That is an interesting
Yeah.
thought.
I mean, that to me is, but that is something that I think you would need somebody, a new, like a staff person, to really watch over that, and it would
Right.
go into, it doesn't necessarily have to go into that specific unit, but it should go into that project. So the new buyer is still paying the regular HOA dues, but that amount has been added to their, as long as they have a capital reserve fund, that amount is added to that HOA's capital reserve fund, possibly.
So then their
They're becoming-
responsibility for that assessment's already covered in the purchase.
So if these are a couple of anomalies, Cindy, how many of these anomalies do we have?
Well, we do, I mean, and some of these are the older projects that, like Hunter Creek, they started out at $80,000. And they're category 4, and I'm sure that's what some of those were category 4, or were Hunter Creek units, because they started out lower, but they also needed a little bit more work too. And the HOA dues at Hunter Creek now are really high because they're trying to do catch-up with their capital projects that they need to get done because they're having issues.
So there's quite a few of them.
Yeah.
It's not an anomaly.
It's not right.
If
These
you-
are just the recent
If you think
sales.
about this, it's basically a random sample, right?
Yeah,
And so
exactly.
how many is this? And maybe there was some big development and there's a magic number of 15 years as the average to turnover until there's more or less, but it's basically a random sample, and there's quite a few in here.
Yeah, I think that idea of trying to look at, as the anomalies come up, if we find one that's way out of the category, I mean, I think that, what you were saying, looking at
See what can
bringing
be
it
done.
up to
Well, I
the
think
standards,
that-
raising the
yeah.
price, and then
And obviously we
maybe
need to
setting
come up with
aside
some
some of
type of
that
a
money
procedure
for
to do
special
that.
assessments or whatever. I mean,
I mean, I'd kind of like to ask like the bigger question, because we're kind of like, we are actively working through all the pieces of sort of the reformation of the system, so to speak. So we've got the pilot for, buy down. It's not that that's directly related to this or right sizing, but certainly the standards for sellers, right? The idea of bringing that up, we're kind of talking around capital reserves, and the question is like, what to do with these categories. And so, I can follow the waterfall in my head of we pick off a few projects, or we bring things up to standard, and now we kind of understand what the cost of doing business is. We want to have this deferred maintenance piece going on. We've all talked about that being an in-house program at some point. If we can scale that standards for seller program up enough, well, then you've got your first hire, right? And then you've got the person who can start testing these things. So we're talking around all these, we're all kind of pointing in the same direction, but like at some point I wonder how we can get a strategic plan in place of like how this actually moves forward, start to really build a timeline and move forward more directly.
yeah. I mean, I think
I wonder if you've stumbled on it with some of these units you just talked about,
Yeah.
right.
where every one of them, they get brought up to a higher income level and that, or higher
Sales price.
sales price, and that difference
Yeah.
gets stuffed aside and APCHA controls it, or somebody does for the benefit of the HOA.
Yeah.
And I think that once, and after the talk that we had with, we met with Liz and with Diane, Bethany, and Matthew and I met today, and I think that one of the things that we want to know is all of this current sales prices, how far either above the, what's in our guidelines, how far above they are for each category, or how far below that some of them are as well. Because one of the things that people forget is that the maximum sales prices that are in our guidelines or in our regulations are for newly deed restricted units, because the day somebody closes on that unit, it's already over that price. So that is not the maximum price that somebody can afford in that category. That's the maximum price that we sell it for at the very beginning. And that's, and I think that once we get some of that information, hopefully we'll be able to garner some information that, and procedures possibly, or policy that we can bring back to the board and make some type of a recommendation on that.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd love to see that come forward, and I'd like to do that in coordination with not just us, but, you know, the county, or really all those that are involved in production as well. And as we're thinking about that, really game out, you know, following those numbers and average turnover, and if we keep doing that over time, 20 years from now, what does that mean for the product mix? Because my guess is what it means is we've substantially kind of fixed the existing system, but we've created a larger and larger chasm of product at the bottom end. And, you know, maybe it's the case that incomes go up and that's actually a good thing or whatever. It may be the case that we've priced out the people who run the town in so many ways, and this was intended to do, which shouldn't be a road, you know, stopper in and of itself, but it does mean we need to be coordinated so that when we are developing new stuff, we're being mindful of how are we filling in that growing missing portion at the bottom end, for instance. So I just think that coordination piece is important. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I think that tied to that gap is a question of how much are property values increasing compared to wage increases.
Right.
And I suspect that they're growing at a faster rate than wage increases. So we are going to be increasing that gap of affordability at the bottom.
Well, my question is, though, is to that extent is, you can't tell from this data or from this information, but how many qualified individuals, like you guys have qualified in each category? What's the biggest?
That's a really good question.
Biggest?
The biggest category of qualified individuals looking to buy,
Probably category 3 or 4.
which feels
3 in the
normal,
family.
but I mean, you
And then
get
2.
12 category 4 units, 10 category 4 buyers in this pool. So 2 category 3s or whatever moved up. But to me, that's the gap you want to fill. Are we moving those up to the right price point in that category? Or should we be moving the price point down to meet a need in a lower category?
Well, I mean, we're kind of talking about two different things here. There's like,
Changing the category to allow for that.
well, there's
buyer.
current gap, right, which is like highest need, right, and so there's a gap highest need to where we are, which is what you're talking about. There's the growing COVID gap, as I would call it, of like category 5 in RO, because people who were buying free market are now out of it. So there's sort of that gap. That's the snapshot now. I totally agree with that. What I'm saying is if we're talking about really reforming this to start bringing up these prices, fill in capital reserves, the predicted, in my mind, consequence of that 20 years from now, as we do that, is going to be that lower gap. And so let's not like wait until 20 years from now. Let's be thinking about that, because it takes a long time for us to build or create new product. And so let's be mindful of the gap we're creating while we do it. Does that make sense, John?
It does, but I see we already have that speaking to us that the lower income isn't there. I
Yeah.
mean, when you're seeing the LIHTC housing going unrented, right, on the super low end.
On the super low end, that's absolutely true.
And I'd like to know, because previously that RO category, that RO gap was being filled by Basalt, by Carbondale,
Yeah.
by different places
And now
down
it's not.
Valley, and now those numbers have skyrocketed. I mean, I looked at something today, Aspen, a rental property in Soper's Village, which is the housing development next to City Market there in Elgeville. $8,500 a month somebody wants to rent a house in there.
Oh my gosh, really?
That was, I mean, I had friends that, you know, working class just like I am, we are, and they were renting there for $2,500, $2,600, $3,000 was a big number for them.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden, those numbers are going nuts too.
Yeah, no, that's true. And we're not going to solve, and we can't solve what will happen in 20 years. What I'm asking is that as we move forward, we do it in collaboration and communication with the developers of new housing, so we can start to forecast that stuff and not give other people the same problems we're with.
Yeah. John, do you know what the rate of real estate growth right now, or Carson? Do you know what that is right now in the valley?
What do you mean by real estate growth?
The value of property
Development
every year.
of property, no, I mean, it's just been such a huge anomaly. I mean, I had a guy that worked for me bought a house in Aspen. Glenn was a president of the bank down in Glenwood Springs. In 2019, he bought the house for $700,000. Was able to retire 3 years early because he sold the house in 2022 for $1.4 million.
Things are going
So it
down
doubled
again,
in
though,
2 years.
right now. So
Well,
that's-
other
that is one
places,
thing.
but are
And
they going
interest rates
down
are
here?
going up, and you have to
Yeah.
take that into consideration
exactly.
Down
as
Valley,
well.
you're not seeing huge price adjustments yet.
Right.
I mean, certainly not in Basalt and Willits,
You mean you haven't
Well,
seen
here
it?
so far,
You
that's-
think
You mean you
Yeah.
haven't seen it slow
Seen
down?
a little bit in Newcastle, but not huge numbers, kind of that further down Valley. But those price adjustments aren't hitting yet. I mean, you're seeing some properties that had crazy list prices
Right.
that
Yeah.
are adjusting, trying to meet the market, but nobody is,
I'd say 200 to 300%
nobody,
in the last 4 years.
nobody's.
I know things don't
My
stay long
property's
in
gone
the
up
market.
500%
Yeah.
since
Yeah, I've seen some
2009.
price cuts recently.
Yeah,
Yeah, but not, I mean, I've
not a
seen.
lot.
For you.
I watch them today, and a lot of them are rentals.
Well, 2009, it
A lot
tanked,
them
of
are
course, down to,
short-term
Sure.
rentals and
but then
Well,
recovered
You know,
quite healthily.
yeah, exactly. They're not really the housing market.
I mean, I think this is a good illustration of how a lot of our problems are connected.
Yeah.
I mean, we started talking about AMI, and we've touched on capital reserves, right? I mean, it's like you talk about the prices of the houses, I mean, it's there's a lot involved in that, and it's all interconnected. So,
Well, didn't we start with discussing whether or not we were going to adjust our AMI? Can we get
Yeah.
back to that? Because
yeah,
when I look at that number of $41,961, at Fat Belly, I pay that much. And those are like the bottom of the barrel kind of workers. And so, how many people are making less than that? Not very many.
Right.
right.
So that, when I see that number, that's an indication to me that it's not representative of the Roaring Fork Valley.
That's the
That's that
top end of
person,
that category is 44,200.
right,
Right.
which
Right?
is,
And then that's category one, so anybody between, I pay tellers $25 an hour, that's
40,000. No, it's more than that.
$45,000,
Yeah.
so they're category two.
Yeah,
But, I look at it and I don't see a huge, nobody's really bumping up to the,
And
To the,
category one, for one thing, we don't have a lot of category one ownership units. And category one is hard for us because I mean, there are some people who you're looking at their income tax returns and we're going, how do you live here?
yeah.
And it's because they're in a cash business. And they do not claim,
Right.
I would say at least 50%, if not more, of their cash. And that's what's hard on us, is they want to say they work here full time, but we're looking at it, we're going, no, you don't.
They want the credit
Yeah,
for the 1,500 hours, but not reflected in their
in their
tax
income tax
return.
returns.
Right.
So that's
Right.
been a little
Which is
bit
a
hard
really
for us.
difficult for us to
Right.
square that.
Well,
So the recommendation, Bethany, is just for now, leave the categories where they are.
Yeah, I think so, and I was glad you all had that discussion, because as we were writing the memo, we were like, we want them to have a discussion about this and really look at it before we go
Yeah.
anywhere. So I think it's leaving it as they are, and certainly we can continue the conversation of an affordability standard and look at those other items that have been brought up because of this discussion.
Yeah, I mean, just a sort of crazy way, like a dream, right? Like just
Do it.
throwing it out. I mean, to me, I think something like that, looking at the categories, finding these anomalies that are way cheaper, bringing them up, looking at the HOA reserves as all part of that process. And then, depending on if there is then still room, maybe for the 123,000, maybe we decide that one should be, 250 or 3, and for category 4. I do think that the deferred maintenance group, or they could do work for some of these HOAs. I mean, I think that is money that would be, you could set it up where it would pay for itself, right? Where the HOAs would pay these people to do the work, and right. I mean, understanding that'd be a lot of work, but like right now, our HOA, we've got roof leaks that we know need to be repaired before winter. We cannot get a roofer to come look. They just call and say, not big enough, click.
Yeah.
You know, you put out landscaping bids and it's like, it's hard to find, right? So landscaping is a bad example, but the maintenance piece, I think from a capital reserve standpoint, I mean, if there was a way to maybe incorporate all of that to fund some of the maintenance, again, this is like thinking 10 years down the road, right? And like not anything to be set up. I don't know, I think something like that could work. It'd be very complex, but I think with the challenges that we've got and trying to keep these aging properties in good condition with limited HOA budgets, I think.
Well, part of this is like incorporated in that, you know, APCHA buying, you know, take for example that category 4 that sold for $123,000, and I'm gonna throw out,
Right.
guy lived in it for 30 years,
Right.
did nothing to it, the cabinets, the carpet,
Right.
a lot of that needs to be redone. 10%, you know, right, that's the cap.
Right.
Not gonna
10%
quite do
doesn't
it.
get it there, right? So APCHA we should also be looking at those units going, we need to bring them up to the
Right.
new level, right?
Right, so like to use that one, I mean, what I was sort of thinking is like, so it's 123. Maybe you put 50 into it for carpet and cabinets and everything else. You look at the HOA and you say, this thing is grossly underfunded.
Mhm.
It's gonna be a $50,000 special assessment. So there's $100,000. And then, you know, maybe we determine through an affordability standard that the minimum price for a category 4 should be $250,000. And then, so then you sell it and then you take that extra $24,000 and that funds capital reserve programs.
And what did the owner get out of that?
They get
They
their,
get a-
the-
they get a-
That
their
the
sales price.
123.
They get an,
Yeah, they wouldn't get the additional.
They get
no,
the
they
sales
wouldn't,
price.
they get the
maximum
123.
prices.
Yeah,
And then the
okay.
new buyer gets a new property with a funded HOA reserve.
Mm-hmm.
And a better system.
And then, you know, there's some extra capital in there to fund a capital reserve program. Again,
No, I mean, I think the thinking's in the right direction, and I don't think we should like minimize it or say it's going to be in 10 years. Like,
Right.
you know, we should start pursuing it and recognize that it will take time and complexity, but like, you know, we should get moving on it. And we've already got the standards for sellers in our program for
Yeah.
this year, our work plan. We've got the capital reserves. I think we have an affordability standard in there as well. I can't remember.
no, we don't. And
So that's the piece that
Yeah.
maybe we'd consider adding.
well, and I think the affordability standard is the first step. I think you've got to go
Right.
down that road and you've got to figure that out. And there's got to be a difference in what a bank will approve and where you'd like to see it, just from a capital reserve.
Could you explain
standpoint.
affordability standard just a little bit? So if your income is this, then this is what you can afford?
Right.
Okay.
So debt to income.
Yeah,
Well,
okay.
it's
That
more
did.
than that, because, you know, banks take into certain things in the calculation today that weren't ever in there before, thanks to
Right.
Dodd-Frank.
Like what?
Yeah.
You know, HOA dues are calculated into
Right.
that calculation, your
Insurance.
insurance, whatever else.
Taxes.
But, you know, so they'll approve you on certain debt to incomes, but maybe that debt to income's not sufficient, knowing what's out there, right? Knowing, if you look at this HOA and say, well, yeah, they have a nice assessment,
Right.
it's not cheap, and they're trying to build reserves, but they're sorely underfunded
Right.
for what they need to do. To me, that's another, you know, I almost think you can create a, you know, I do this with a lot of things, but you create a spreadsheet and you score things, right? And then that affordability standard, you know, maybe it scores a 60, you know, and I'm just throwing numbers out there, and that would be, you know, you'd want a higher income because they're going to have more responsibilities in the
Right.
future. Whereas it was a 90 affordability standard, that's pretty good. You can live with a lower income and
Right.
better qualifications.
Yeah, I think you get two properties that are exactly the same, and one has a really well-funded HOA, and one has one that's way underfunded. I mean, those are different requirements.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I think it's a good discussion. I mean, I think what we're hearing is, I think it makes sense to leave the categories where they are. And Allison's got a question. Hand up.
Well, just to clarify that our AMI, like maybe we put a note in this, check back in June, because that will change in May theoretically. Like we've had an anomaly a couple of years where we haven't seen our assigned, I guess, AMI go up, but theoretically it will, and your category and your earning levels, like, we don't really need to change the categories. Theoretically, if it's working properly and there's no worldwide pandemic, our category numbers are changing anyway, right?
The income's changing,
Possibly,
but the category's
Yeah.
staying the same, right? The income could move.
yeah.
So for us to right now say, actually, the category, and like, your earnings should be this or this, it's gonna change anyway. So I agree to keep it as it is, and just a reminder, it's gonna change next year, and then, and the next year after that, and that might change people around in what category they're in anyway. But we'll definitely,
Right.
if the numbers get better, if the data gets better, better reflect what people are earning in this community, right? Because category 1 might go up if our AMI goes up.
The thing of it is that we're still using, you have to remember that we're still using 2019 numbers, because it took a pretty big dip in 2020, and then it went up a little bit, but the last figures that we got in April of this year, middle of April, first part of May of this year, still wasn't as high as what 2019 was. So it'll be interesting, because CPI has been, it's starting to go down a little bit now, but CPI has been going up like 8-9%.
Yeah.
And, but
Amazing,
I see it
6.25%
gradually going, it's gradually
prime.
going down now. So when we do our increases, like for our assets, and for our rental rates, we take a November to November difference, and we see what that is, and that's what we do our increases in assets, and what we used to do our increases in income before we went to AMI. So, but that affects sales prices, rental rates, and assets. And it can't go higher than 3%, but it's 3% or the consumer price index, whichever is less.
Well, and so I think if we're going to go down the road of the affordability, the affordability standard, we're going to have to understand what the problem is with a lot of the HOAs. I know previously there used to be a program where there was like capital reserve reviews that the
HOAs were supposed to do in 2008. I thought that came out from the state legislature. Or, so do we get copies of those assessments, those reviews, the studies?
What?
Do we have an idea on those studies? HOAs at some point, I want to say in 2008, the legislature came out, maybe 2009.
under
and
Kiowa.
Required kind of HOAs to go out and do a capital assessment of their.
I don't know if they actually, nobody, I can't remember what year we actually, as a housing authority, paid 70, if somebody wanted to do a capital assessment program, they used the same person. We hired one person to do all of them, and the housing authority paid 70%. And they still, because the board felt that they still wanted buy-in from the HOA, but that's been a long time. It's been at least 10 years. And a lot of people didn't keep up with them. We still have them, because we got, because we paid 70% for them, we were allowed to also get them. The thing of it is that we really, the entity that we worked with, we wanted them to also provide us with some type of software, not like an Excel spreadsheet, that people could actually keep themselves, and they can say, we did this year, now it's got a 20-year life, and this is what we need to do. They never followed through with that. So, but I think down the line, I think eventually, I think it'd be a good idea for whether we get involved or not, but it would be nice to have HOAs do assessments. I do know Kiowa requires 9 governance policies. I didn't think they required a specialist or an assessment.
I thought maybe I missed it, but to me, that's an important piece. to
I
know,
would agree.
Right, or does
I
the
agree.
inspector address it, right?
Talked
Yeah.
about that last
Yeah.
summer. Yeah, we were talking about that last summer, and we talked about who's going to do these upgrades and the repairs if we decide we're going to take it on. Like, it's $123,000, but it's so under par that we can't really feel right about selling it, so it needs to be upgraded. So we looked at that last summer about who's going to do those upgrades, who's going to do the core upgrades. How are we going to get people in to do these jobs when we can't get people to build big houses at really high wages? And we looked at that time about, I think that's when Diane talked to my son Forrest about whether people would be willing to work for APCHA. And we kind of came to a
We didn't have enough
dead,
budget.
we kind of came to a dead end with that because Forrest felt like people will make too much money in construction right now to want to work for a government organization. And so I think that's something before we,
That may not always be the case.
I was going to say, that
That's
may
true,
be
that's true.
changing sooner than you think.
yeah, but
You
so
guys
if
have
we
made
go,
it not
before we go
change.
down that road again, that's something we have to think about again,
Yeah.
because it's kind
Too
of a,
much demand, too much
conundrum
pent-up
right now.
energy.
so.
It is, but I mean, I think that, I mean, personally, if we could come up with money to do something like, to offer something like that again, like a highly subsidized
It's like a retainer.
reserve
Yeah.
assessment.
Well, and again, our council's talked about this numerous times
Right.
and has been expressed interest and desire to put money into something like this.
I mean, I think that would be money very well spent, because that helps us understand the capital reserve problem, or not, and then that helps us, you want to look at an affordability standard, well, then you have a better understanding of each of the things, I mean, and then personally, I think on all of the sales, you could probably set it up where if you had that data, you may have somebody who self-selects out of a property. If they look at the reserve study and they see, oh, this thing is underfunded by $40,000 a unit, I'm negative 152. There's no way I can put a $40,000 assessment into this. Maybe I won't even bid, right? Maybe they won't bid on it. Maybe they will.
It's unfortunate, but I don't think that's gonna stop them. It's unfortunate, but I don't
But
I
think
get
it
your
would.
point.
But it's
I
good
mean,
to have the information.
Yeah.
But if I looked at, I mean, if I had one that was a 40,000 underfunded and the roof needed to be repaired in 3 years, like, I'm gonna think twice about buying that unit.
Well, but that's where that, and it's almost unfair too. I was a little skeptical, but what we talked about, where we bring it up to code, bring the price up,
Right.
sell it at a higher level, that excess goes into their share of that capital assessment. If
Yeah.
you got 10 other owners that are
Right.
$40,000 short, does that ever happen?
Right.
And
So-
then maybe you just gotta have
And
those
that-
10
that to
turn
me
over,
is- that
and
is-
then it
That to
happens.
me is you really need buy-in from the HOAs, and I'll tell you, and that was one of the things that we wanted, because we wanted to get as many HOAs involved in this as possible, and we kind of put out there, because also we paid for part of everybody to get the 9 governance policies as well. Because that was part of it, because we brought Molly Foley-Healy from Denver up here, and she actually did a lot of people's 9 governance policies. But what we wanted is if you didn't opt in to do this, and we came up with a program where we would help, you could be involved. Because you didn't opt in to getting the the assessment of the
Yeah.
property.
So that was like a
Yeah, the
carrot.
capital reserve study, because we wanted to give people an incentive, not just paying for most of it, but to really want to have this done. And I do know some HOAs who doubled their dues, and because they follow what they got.
Right.
And they started really taking care of their properties. So there are some HOAs who really followed that and followed through with what they got.
So I guess, Matthew, I have a question for you. As we sort of talk about this, and I don't. My desire is to move forward quickly on these things. I think the community feels that way too, and I kind of hear that as well. We already have the pilot for standards for sellers, and we have like the kind of spoken intention to eventually have something in-house. But, we're in budget season now at council. Council has said they're interested in funding this type of thing. We haven't heard from APCHA or affordable housing yet. Is there any like placeholder or request that we should put in, or would even be ready to be put in, that could be
I
used
don't
in
think
any
it'd be
sort of
ready at
way?
this point. Excuse
Yeah.
me. We put in the budget request for the new compliance person. That's the one we have in there.
Okay.
But
I think until we know which direction we want to go.
Yeah.
And then we can.
but I recognize your
Yeah.
desire that
Good
we
question.
should really. But
How many?
It could come as a supplemental for next year, mid-year
Yeah.
as well, but I just it's a thing we're talking around a lot for like years, right?
Yeah,
It's like,
yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
let's
if it
go.
was easy, it would have been done already.
How
but-
many
Of course,
HOAs
yeah.
are in APCHA
There's,
approximately?
there's like around 80, there's over 80, between
Jeez,
85 and
80
90, I
HOAs.
think.
80 different boards to make
80,
decisions.
80 unhappy presidents out there.
And they're not all reasonable like we are. And how many of our units, remind me, are owners rather than renters out of the 3,000?
It's about half.
Okay.
It's, I think it's a little bit more, I think it's around 1,600 ownership units and 1,300 or 1,200 rentals.
Yeah.
We've been getting more rental units into the mix versus ownership since the credit program. But yeah, so that it's almost, it's not an even split. There's more ownership units, but it's close.
So it's around 1,500 or something
Yeah.
like that. And then, how many of those need to be assessed?
Well, I
Would-
think, I mean, like, to have an HO reserve assessment or a reserve review.
Just to have an understanding of where they stand.
Well, I
Well,
think,
there's about
involved.
85 HOAs out there, deed restricted HOAs, and that's probably, I know that there's some that people keep calling and they say, do you have anybody who you suggest to have us, or, because we want to get one? And.
An assessment.
Yeah, an assessment. So I do know that there's a couple of HOAs out there that have been very progressive and have done that. But the majority probably have not.
Well, I guess I'm just wondering, do we need to hire an assessor for
Well,
ourselves? I mean,
Inspector.
no, I mean, I don't think so. I mean,
No,
what-
you
what
just
is-
you really and truly need to hire, to get somebody who knows what they're doing about capital reserves. And we had somebody who we thought was really good, and we got some pretty good reports. But I think, and because we did an RFP,
Right.
and that's what I think we would need to do again, to get somebody on board to do these and say, we're hoping to have about 90 HOAs that will want these assessments. And what deal can you give us? Because they were usually all around about the same price. Some were a little bit more because it depends. Like if you have a parking garage or something like that, it costs a little bit more because they have to look at that.
So you're saying that-
$2,000,
So, yeah, anywhere between 2 to 3.
2 to 3.
Yeah,
per what?
per
Per
HOA.
Per HOA?
Yeah.
Not per unit.
No, per HOA.
For the whole HOA.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, so to me, I mean, I think you put out an RFP for, if it's 90, you say, 70, right? There'd be some people that'll say, no way, don't
Yeah.
want anything to do with it. And then I think, if we can come up with funding to fund 70, 80, 90% of that, I mean, it's money extremely well spent, right? Because you're telling the people who have a problem, you have a problem. And then if we're paying for it, then we understand the scope of the size of the problem. I mean, to me, I think if you're putting dollars to work, that's one of the best ways to do it, because you're putting dollars to the problem.
I still have a spreadsheet.
But so this person is also an assessor of sorts. I mean,
That's what they do.
Yes.
right?
yeah,
They go-
that's
they
what
go
I'm saying.
bump
So,
around and
so
look
this
at
is a
the-
one-time expenditure. They do it
Yeah, yeah.
once per HOA.
Well, you should have it updated like every 5 years.
Right.
I mean, that's the best way to do it. You should always have it updated about every 5 years, because you end up doing stuff, and so it's that you're starting out with a new life on something because you replaced the roof. Now you're starting out with a new 20-year life. And so your HOA dues, because that's how they figure out what you should be charging with your HOA dues as well. Especially if you want to be 100% funded, so you don't have to go out and get a loan. And and they know what they're doing, and they can provide that. They provide that information to us.
Yeah. Sounds like a reasonable thing to do.
Don't want to get too far out in front of our
Yeah.
skis, but I think in the context of the affordability standard, I think that's a very important piece to understand. So that was clear.
Freewheeling.
Covered all the problems. Bethany, anything you need from us? I mean, I think
No,
that.
I think we'll just summarize what you all talked about and do some digging into whether it's an RFP or kind of look at what the capital reserve piece is and bring that back at a future meeting just to
Yeah, I
Make
mean,
sure we're all on the same page.
I think you can do that in parallel with, I mean, starting to look at an affordability standard and what we would want to go into that. I mean, I think, like I said, all this is so intertwined.
It is.
I really like the idea of a rubric with all the different components.
Yeah.
That's a great idea.
Anyway, thank you for these numbers, for this. I mean, I think this is helpful. I mean, for me, in looking at this, the problem is not as bad as I thought it was.
That's great.
Yeah.
Great. Well, up next,
So,
More
Cindy
deep
and I,
right
if we're ready to go into rightsizing,
Rightsizing.
are you okay with that, Carson?
Another easy problem.
I'm really excited. Liz very nicely presented a great data set or a survey analyzing on rightsizing at our last meeting. And what we have done internally as staff is thought about a potential pilot program for rightsizing. This is not final. This is very much, if the board likes this direction, we will bring it back kind of in a better format, more finalized, but we really wanted to make sure that we're going in the right direction. So we started off with, okay, great. People said they wanted to right size, but when it actually happens, do people want to right size? So we thought, let's create some sort of swap board. And I don't know what that necessarily looks like, but the idea behind it is people would let us know they're interested in right sizing. They might say, as my example, I have a 3-bedroom unit in Aspen that allows pets, and I'm looking for X. And then someone else might come and say, I'm in a 1-bedroom and I have 2 kids, and I'm really looking for a 3-bedroom in Aspen that allows pets. And so we could figure out if that match might work based upon whether the person in the 3-bedroom was okay with a 1-bedroom. And so, I think we can start seeing what people are looking for, and try to make some matches. We know that there's going to be specifics. People are either going to want in town with pets, first floor, and it doesn't matter on whatnot. And so we want to see what's out there and kind of if we can make any matches. We're proposing that potentially we allow for 5 of these for the first year. This is taking units outside of the lottery process, so we want to be cognizant of that fact too. So I think, those are it's kind of like the basis of it. And then there's definitely a lot of details. Qualification packets would have to be completed for both parties making the switch. We were thinking that from a retirement standpoint, if someone's over the age of 60, we could waive retirement funds, or waive a portion of retirement, because a lot of times as people get towards retirement, their retirement funds get really high, which means they are not going to qualify for a lower category unit. We think that minimum occupancy should likely be met with the move. New deed restrictions would be required. Obviously, we'd still want inspections to be done to make sure everyone's aware before they go in. So that is a very fast run through of just sort of some basic outlines of what we think might work, and whether people actually, when it comes time, will actually say they want to right size, or if they just answered that way on the survey.
Allison.
I don't have to go first, but I got a lot of questions.
Great.
I'm going to start with easy ones. Well, I'm going to start with a recommendation. If you were to do this, I would recommend that the only people who can contact you to begin with are the ones who are interested in downsizing, right-sizing smaller. You will obviously get 3,000 people contacting you asking for a better fit. Maybe not the entire population, but half of our population, I bet, is would be contacting you. Oh, I'd really prefer to, I'd be totally into swapping. I just want dogs. I'd be totally into swapping. Well, you don't want the people who are trying to get something out of it, you want the downs, like the net bedroom gainers to be the ones who are contacting you, right? So that would be my recommendation. When you find a place to post that, there's a way for someone to like apply to be that swappy, but I wouldn't say both sides get posted or else you'll be inundated. I would also say, I don't know how you're trying to build out a Facebook for APCHA, which we've talked about before, but I think that is a huge undertaking. So like, is this all listed and hosted and overseen on our website? And do we have the staffing power for something like that? Some other questions and concerns are how much these houses would sell for.
So they would go for their max sales price as of what's in the system right now. So it wouldn't be like there's a reduction in the price because they're willing to right size. And then as far as like where it's going to be hosted, I'm not sure what we're going to build out yet, whether it's going to be as simple as an Excel spreadsheet that we keep internally that's a list of who's looking to right size kind of down to reduce their bedrooms, or what it looks like. Again, this is really just start of ideas, trying to figure some things out.
Thank you. Then I think also just how will you rank people? You know, like this really allows for one-for-ones. I think our system's complicated enough that there might be issues where like we could make it all work if it's a zigzag, this person goes here so that these people can go here so that these people can go here, and then we have a new unit up for the lottery or whatever. So because this only allows right now, the you and me are swapping one for one, how do you decide who benefits from that? Because I would assume that more than one family who's had a kid since they won their units find out there's a 3-bedroom open now, and bid for that swap for someone who's willing to downsize. And I would want to make sure that we are really clear on our prioritization.
Well, part of that, I think the downsizer would probably have some choice in that, right? Because the
Like how they
downsizer may
need
have some
to.
parameters. They want to downsize to a 1-bedroom or 2-bedroom, but I want to be closer to town, or I want to be, whereas that 1-bedroom comes up or 2-bedroom comes up and it's not where they want to be. They
Or
may
they can't
not be
afford it.
willing to downsize, right?
Right. They want a specific area.
Well, that, to me, that's the, maybe some don't really give a crap, but I'm guessing a lot of them would want to downsize, but
And I
they
think-
have certain parameters they want to have met.
And I think
right?
that's why we want to keep it at 5 for right now, because we want to know how much work by us that's going to take to play matchmaker.
I mean, then you're gonna know a lot of the stuff about people that, you probably have a database of people who want to move up, have something bigger and where they're living today almost.
I mean, it's been a few years, but I've heard of people saying, I'm a single person in a 3-bedroom. There's a wonderful family that I like. They I'd like to swap with them. You may have some of that too, right? Where 2 people approach you and say,
Yeah.
we've identified each other. We'd like to swap, right? And that-
Carson, we've heard that recently.
Yeah.
That they've kind of come up with their own plan, and we just don't have a program in place to allow that to happen because the units have to go through the lottery under current regs.
And
So
if
it's
they
still
both go to a
happening.
bank, can they be tied together, or would it just be 2 completely separate
Two
transactions?
separate transactions,
Yeah.
buy-sell transactions, whatever else.
I mean, I like this. I mean, I think I like it as a pilot program. It doesn't take away from anything in the lottery because it's units that otherwise are probably not going to hit the market anyway. And it gets empty bedrooms filled at a minimal expense, and maybe maybe APCHA helps with helps with closing costs, or comes up with some money to sort of test this out. I don't know.
But we're
But
waiving the fees,
waiving the fees, but they're still going to have title, and they're still going to have some
transaction costs.
transaction costs. I like it.
Well, I think the proof's in the pudding on, do you allow people to down category, even if their income's a certain level or their assets are a certain level.
Allison?
Oh, yeah, just if we had money to spend, I would say it's maybe even more so on if someone can't afford it, right? Someone is no longer working, there's a really nice 2-bedroom or really nice 1-bedroom, that family wants to move up, and we can't get that bedroom gain because that downsizer can't get the new, like they're with whatever rate they got when they bought was so good, or they're paid off, and now they're gonna take on the expense.
But they're getting a 3-bedroom.
No, they're getting a 1-bedroom. I'm saying
You're
if the
talking
person
about
who.
the, yeah.
The
Right.
other side
Yeah.
of the transaction.
So I have a question about this. I think it came from Kelly today when we were together. So if you are in category 4 and you want to downsize, and the downsize that you're going to swap with is a category 2, then we're approving that?
That's what we haven't talked about.
So
is-
what's in here is you could go one category lower or one category higher. So, but again, that was us throwing around ideas, Francie. That's a great thing of us trying to figure things out. We know retirement funds are going to be an issue, and so we thought, okay, if we waive retirement funds only if the person's over 60 to figure out what their category might be, that might help, because we know it's going to be an interesting battle trying to figure out those categories.
I just am a little worried that other people in the program will hear about a swap and go bat crazy. Like, how did that happen? How come they got to go into that and I didn't get to do
Well,
that?
this
And I've
is-
wanted
this is
to
gonna be
change for a
made
long
public.
time.
Right, we'll make
Yeah.
it very.
We have to
we'll
make it
the public
Right.
program very public.
Always means
You make
people
it
are
very
not
what?
surprised by things.
Make it very what?
Public.
Yeah, we're not gonna do this behind closed
write a
doors.
newsletter.
We're gonna say this is a pilot program, and if
Best open rates
you
in
know
town.
of an instance, or if you have an idea, bring it forward to us, and we're gonna do 5. And I think if we limit it and
Right.
people know, and.
It's not a
and
free-for-all.
Yeah, and it's not, yeah, exactly.
I mean, I would call it the voluntary,
Yeah.
Yeah,
I would call it
Voluntary.
the voluntary right-sizing program or pilot, right? I mean, I wouldn't frame it as a swap. I mean, I would
Yeah.
frame it as
Voluntary right
this,
sizing pilot.
this is a right-sizing pilot. We are trying to get empty bedrooms filled.
Yes, all pray to the holy net bedroom gain, NBG.
Yes. Yes.
And I think as we said, like if 5 go in the first 2 months and it's working really well, there's nothing to say that we can't come back to you all and keep you updated and say, hey, what do we think about doing 10 more? What does it look like?
Yeah. So that's exactly the question I had. Is I'm fine with limiting the pilot to 5, but I wouldn't want to say like we're not allowed to do
Right.
6 ever. So just so we're clear that we'll come back after 5 and figure out how that goes.
I think we'll come back after 1.
Well, yeah. The other thing that
Good or bad?
I wanted to check in on is at the council table, we've greenlit a right-sizing pilot as well. The details aren't fully baked yet. We're sort of in this phase, but it looks like probably around 5 units of Burlingame 3, which will have preferential lottery for net bedroom gain. And so I just want to make sure that we'll also be getting reports on that stuff. Cool. That's great. And then the other question I had on this program is if we get multiple, swap-friendly alignments, how do we choose?
Well, if we have multiple, we just go increase the number,
First in, first out. I mean,
right? We got 5, but if there's 6 or whatever you said.
No, I don't mean that. I mean if there's like one person who lists and there's 3 matches for that list.
I think, both sides of the equation are going to have to
Right.
figure it out who they want to swap with.
those are 3
Okay.
different properties, and
Right.
ultimately the person downsizing gets to
Right.
choose and say,
We
I
put it
want-
back to that.
I want
Yeah.
that one.
that's the
Okay.
one.
Right. I mean, it's a voluntary thing,
It's
so they're going to
voluntary,
have to
right?
do
Yeah.
Got it.
some screening and figure out what's best for
Right.
them and who they want to do business with and all that. That's
it.
not up
Right.
to us.
Got it. Okay.
And why not Aspen Village, Smuggler, and Lazy Gillen?
So Aspen Village, Smuggler, and Lazy Glen. So Aspen Village and Lazy Glen are on and Smuggler. They're on totally different deed restrictions. And they're all whatever the market will bear. They don't necessarily, I can't imagine a Aspen Village owner would want to enter the deed restricted category.
I see.
It's a more detailed deed restriction than what they're under with I don't want to say stricter requirements, but there's definitely more requirements than what Aspen Village and Lazy Glen have to follow.
And they would have to go under a new deed restriction.
And Smuggler, same idea?
Yeah. Well, for one thing, Smuggler Park subdivision, the deed restriction goes away in 2037.
Oh,
So, and people don't even have to work. So that's one of the reasons why Smuggler is pretty much
I see.
out.
it's just a separate
Yeah.
thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Would it make sense when people go to sell to ask if they, I guess people sell for all different reasons, but like the next thing that hits the market that's 3 bedrooms, should we? Yeah, never mind. I take that back. I will instead address what Skippy said about if it's working at 5, let's go 10. I mean, earlier today we just said we don't want people picking who their next, resident of a house is by like sham marrying them and swapping people out that way. I think we have to get really careful, especially if there's already 5 units. I mean, I guess that's 2024 or something at the Lumberyard or Burlingame. What did you say that'll be used this way? New people to the valley, new people to the housing system. New workforce is also super valuable, and to keep removing 1 and 2 bedrooms from our stock because they got filled by someone who's also already in the stock, I think is a scary priority.
Yeah, and I've heard you raise that concern before, and I appreciate it. I think at the end of the day, we've got to do both. we've got to get our unused bedrooms back, and we have to create more. And we can't say because it hurts one problem, we should also not solve the other problem. And so that's why we're limiting it as well. I mean, yes, we're taking 5 of those units, but we're outside of those 5. There's another 74 coming online. So to me, that feels like a win-win.
And you may have nobody take any of the 5.
We may have nobody
Yeah,
take it, but we're going to
exactly.
learn. I mean, we've got to take some action here. So, and I just want to say I hear you.
Yeah, and I'm not as worried about the council thing as I guess what we're saying here is like if 5 work, let's do 10. I
Well,
think
what I'm saying on that, Allison, is not we should do 10. I'm saying let's not keep ourselves from doing more of something that works if it proves to work. That's all. But we'll all
Then
review
I
that
guess-
together.
as we hone in on this pilot program parameters, like how do we know it's quote working? Like how are we going to measure that it's working and not having that adverse effect, I guess, on our housing
Net bedroom
stock?
gain would be a good measure.
Yeah, right. I mean, because the option is the status quo, and then we end up with empty bedrooms.
Well, in theory,
Well,
You're
right
gonna
now
be
we
net-
end up with houses on the houses in the lottery. I guess one thing to me that would mean it's not working is nothing goes to lottery, right? Like it's all swippity swappity.
But
So
it could be that the person wasn't even thinking about buying or selling.
Right.
And now they say, well, that's not a bad idea. If I can get over here, I'm willing to
Right.
go down to a 1 bedroom. If I can get over here, otherwise they probably, no, I'm going to just stay in my unit because
Exactly.
that's, so I think that that's something that will be a positive thing as well, is that person is going to be making that decision to I
Get the
want
wheels
to, I'm
turning.
fine with going down to 1 bedroom because I can move here.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I do really appreciate, I guess, detail 3, that minimum occupancy be met, right? That we're not keeping bedrooms open, and definitely not
Right.
Rachel's concern that she brings up a lot, that we're not getting someone in, even getting a gain for a year or 2, but then they have 2 empty bedrooms again because their kids moved out.
Right.
If they went from a 4 to a 3, for instance.
It's a good point, Allison, about could we move accidentally to like a no lottery situation? And so maybe one way to just evaluate that, just thinking off the top of my head, is just sort of, doing a little exit interview during this. Like, what would you have otherwise done had this program not been there?
It's a good idea.
well, your 5 units could create 5 lottery houses, or
That's,
5 lottery
that's
units,
my
right?
assumption, which we will
This one
test.
may create 5 exchanges of property that right-size families.
Sort of hermit crab scenario, and then that creates 5
Mhm.
more.
Right.
Yeah, but we'll see.
Yeah. Just, it's movement.
Right.
Yeah, and introducing movement in itself.
Right.
is-
And
Right.
is it something that we would even entertain if somebody says, I wasn't gonna move, but I do really like this family, and I'm willing to move out of the program if you let this family buy it? So it's not a swap.
That's a different.
That I realize that that's something different, because that's
Yeah.
also, you have to be really careful, because somebody could say, if you go
Yeah,
ahead and say
exactly.
that.
Here's a little
here's a little
something for
money
the
underneath
puppies.
the table, so that's
Yeah.
that's a little bit harder, I
I'll
would
buy
agree.
your couch for 50
Yeah.
grand.
Yeah, I think
It's such a nice
That-
couch.
That
It's so
begs
comfortable.
for
Yeah,
money
that's-
under
Cindy,
the table.
I just
I think
melt
we
every
should keep
time.
track of those, though. If people do present us with those questions, and it's more just information that we can have, so that if we're not seeing movement from this pilot program, or if council doesn't see movement from the Burlingame Phase 3, you know, if we are looking for movement, we can evaluate those as they come up down the road too.
Right.
I like it.
I like it.
So my direction then, I think, just to confirm, is we internally, staff will work on kind of tailoring this a little bit more, putting it more in what could be a, you know, better document, trying to figure out some of these nuances, and then bringing it back to you all for final review and figure out, you know, when we launch it and where it goes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
let's do it.
Good, good.
Good idea.
Looks like the last thing on the agenda.
Well, then,
I have one question before we disperse, as it sounds like you're alluding to, and that's just our next meeting schedule. It looks like we have 2 total meetings left for the year. November 30th is listed, and it's listed as tentative.
That's
I
because it's
don't
my
need a
birthday,
confirmation
so
if
we
that's
might take
really.
it off. Just kidding.
I don't know if that's really. I don't need to know. If
I'm
that one's
trying
really happening,
to-
I just need to know.
I'm
if
trying to
anything's
schedule
happening.
a November date, but I have to work with both the city and the county, and the
Okay.
election that's coming up and everything else. So the date that I could come up with was November 30th, but I've asked for some information with regards to the county's schedule, and I'm gonna ask for information on the city's schedule to see if there's any other date in November that we can meet earlier than November 30th that doesn't coincide with the week of Thanksgiving.
Okay, that's helpful, because in my mind, if I knew I didn't have anything between now and the 30th, I would start booking those evenings. But you're saying hold our November
And I
Wednesdays.
hope to have an answer for you by next week.
Great.
Fantastic.
Okay,
And in general,
But we have nothing really scheduled until whatever one that one is.
right.
Okay.
yeah, to that point, in general, are we going back to once a month?
No.
No.
no, it's
Okay,
just
it's just that.
It was just a
just-
weird circumstance.
Okay.
No.
It's just a holiday.
vacation,
Weird.
Where's the
election,
staff
We,
gonna
even though we
Thanksgiving.
would like to.
Yeah, I just,
Well, and only one in December.
I'm a scheduler, man. I gotta know.
Yeah.
So that's a very unusual situation.
Yeah.
Great.
All right.
Then would you entertain a motion for adjournment?
I would.
Thank you.
I'll second.
All right.
Did
We
you
have
motion?
a motion to adjourn and a second from John.
Call that a Rick head.
Okay. Allison,
Yes.
Francie,
Yes.
Carson,
Yes.
Skippy,
Indeed.
John.
Aye.
Meeting is adjourned,
I was
5:44.
gonna say no, just to,
Nice.
so it wasn't a unanimous.
You would do that.
Recording stopped.
Thank you, everybody.
Cindy, you're gonna work with Charlotte on getting John officialized.
Yes, I will do that.